Howdy folks, welcome to the Odin Leather Goods Workshop. Every week I get a ton of questions from you asking about the workshop itself, how big is it, what tools do we have inside, where we're located. Well, today we're going to try to answer all those questions for you on the first ever Odin Leather Goods Workshop tour. Come along. So we're going to start today's tour off with the biggest piece of technology I have in the shop, which is my 50-watt Epilogue Helix laser cutter. I've got this machine about 2 years ago, and it has been a bit of a workhorse for me. I don't use it much for quote-unquote producing leather goods. More than not, I use it for prototyping. I use it for cutting templates and jigs and things like that. That's really where this has been very, very strong for me. Epilogue is known as being a pricier machine. It's definitely more in the premium category when it comes down to laser cutters. But for me in this workshop, I didn't want to be a laser mechanic. I want to be a user of the laser machine. So we kind of splurged a little bit on the Epilogue. We also wanted a big, powerful laser that was in a small package. And some of the other laser packages we've seen out there may be cheaper, but they take up a lot more space. They have to have water coolers and exhaust and things like that. This is a nice compact space. The Epilogue handles the changing weather conditions out here in the workshop without fault. Some days it's very, very cold in here. Other days it's very, very hot in here. And I don't have to worry about the machine breaking because of the extreme swings in temperature. You all see on the left-hand side here, I got all my storage. I got tons of acrylic here. This pile of acrylic ebbs and flows throughout the week. We start off with a nice big pile, and then every other week or so we're buying more acrylic to fill the shelf so we can always keep things moving on acrylic template production. My wife loves to use the laser to do, Yeti cups and mugs and things like that. And you've probably seen some of the leather crafters on here that we've made mugs and Yetis for over the past year. We're always putting logos and things because we have the laser here. We like to help support the leathercraft community and use it to help them out as well. One of the things I'm asked about most often is my collection of sewing machines. The very first machine I ever purchased was this one here. This is a SewPro Mini 441. It's very similar to machines like the Cobra 3 and the Cobra 4, or some of the machines made by companies like Texo, Thor, and even Conso and a few other makers out there. It's been a great machine for me. I'm very happy with it. It will sew through about 3/4 inch of leather very, very easily. So I use this for heavy duty stitching, things like gun belts, things like bags that are made out of thick leathers. It does a beautiful job at that. After buying my big 441 machine, the next machine I got was this one here. This is a FAF 335. When you work with machines, you very quickly realize that not one machine will do it all for you. And that's what I realized with the 441. It was actually a little too big and too heavy duty to do small things like wallets and small pouches and other flat goods. So I went out and bought this machine from a guy named Noah Marion down in Austin, Texas, a year or so after I got the 441. When I bought it, it had a bunch of contraptions on it and air hoses and all these other fancy things that I ended up not using. I ripped all that stuff off, and then I converted it from a binding machine to just a regular cylinder arm machine that would stitch lightweight goods. Now, these days I don't use it a ton. It still probably has the best and prettiest stitch of all the machines I have. I really like it a lot. I probably will never get rid of this machine because I do have some sentimental value attached to it, but it doesn't get used as much as the other ones, mainly because of the tabletop that I have here. I really need a different tabletop to get more use out of it. In the future, I'm going to probably convert this machine over to what's called a binding machine, and that will be a good addition to my shop. So, great machine, FAF 335. I love it a lot. It has a beautiful stitch, but as of right now, it's not getting a ton of use in the shop until I convert it over to a binder. All right, so the next machine is this one. This is the Cobra 18. Of all the machines I have in the shop right now, this is the one that probably gets used the most. If you come in the shop on a random day, you're probably going to find me or Brandon or Brenda sitting here at this chair stitching at this machine. This is the only flatbed machine I have in the shop. Funny thing about this one is I bought it at the most inopportune time when there were plenty of excuses not to be spending on money on machines. But we bought it anyway, and it's been great. This is what I would call a medium to light duty stitching machine. I use thread size like 92 and 138 this machine most often. It's great for things like anything flat, some wallets, some belt pouches, things like that. This machine really excels at. In terms of just powering through plenty of goods, Cobra 18 is a machine for us, and very happy with it as well. So the next machine I want to talk about is this one. This is a Cobra 8810. Now, it's shameful, but I gotta admit, I bought this machine from after looking at guys like Michael at Strickland Leather Goods, Lowell Strickland, and a few other guys who are really excelling at making bags. And I have been wanting to up my bag game for a while, so I bought this machine. This is what's called a pedestal sewing machine with a roller foot, powered roller foot, so the roller here moves also. It stitches very, very smoothly. Now, all that said, after having this machine for about a year and a half, I've only used it 3 or 4 times. And I know it's shameful, but we're here to be transparent on these videos and talk about the workshop. And I have lots of big plans for this machine. I just haven't got to them yet. So Cobra 8810, good machine. At least in the testing I've done, it's been a good machine, but I haven't really put it into use just yet. That's probably because I'm just so familiar and used to using the other machines I have here. But big things come for this machine really, really soon. All right, so the final and newest sewing machine in the arsenal is this one here. This is a Cobra 26. I have actually been eyeballing this machine for probably 3 years, and I finally got one. I guess I got it a few months ago from Aaron down at Maker's Leather Supply in Waco, Texas. Compared to the first machine I showed you, which was the 441 machine, this is what would be considered a medium-duty cylinder arm machine. I could stitch some lightweight things here, bags, wallets, a few other things. There is a flatbed attachment you can get to this as well. You can use it as a flatbed machine. But this Cobra 26 is the most flexible one. Even more flexible than that Cobra 4, which I know has so much popularity right now. This is the machine that I would suggest for most people. All right, so the next machine or set of machines we're going to talk about is the presses. Presses are very important around here. This is how we cut leather, how we stamp leather, and probably the machine, the press that I suggest to most people is this one here. This is the 4-ton Mighty Wonder manual clicker press from the folks over at Weaver. It took me a long time to save up for this, but this was definitely a game changer in my shop. It allowed me to cut pieces that were a little bigger, allows me to stamp things with bigger stamps. And even though I have a hydraulic press in here, which we will look at in a moment, this machine still gets used daily around the shop. If we're not cutting on this, we are using stamps, and some of the stamps we use are like these magnesium stamps and dies to do impressions and debossing in leather. It does a beautiful job at that. It also works very well to cut with some of these other dies here, like this. We'll talk about dies in another video. There's plenty we can say about dies. We'll go through the ins and outs of what dies I use and why I use certain ones. But with regarding the presses, this has been a very, very functional press. People thought once I got the hydraulic press, I'd get rid of this one. In fact, I didn't. I use this press just as much today as I did before I had the hydraulic press. Very functional and highly recommended to anyone. All right, so let's talk about the big boy over here. This is my 16-ton Cowboy hydraulic press. This was the machine I always knew I wanted to get. I always knew hydraulic was the direction I wanted to go, which is part of the reason why I got the 4-ton manual press and not the 11-ton manual press, because I knew eventually I was going to get this one. Once we started doing really big jobs like cutting, thousands of pieces at a time, it was imperative that we got this. This really increased production as well as consistency and accuracy with some of the things that we're cutting. You control it pretty easily. The head swings back and forth, so you can maximize the use of your material. You can raise and lower the head by turning this knob here. And when you're finally ready to click something out, you have to put both fingers on it and it will go up and down. You notice on either side of it, I do have some workspace as well. And that's also was very important to maximize the use of this machine. The only reason why I would get rid of this one, which is a possibility, is because I'll get a bigger one. Not bigger just because of the tonnage that it applies, force that it applies down, but also bigger because we want a little bigger cutting surface. This is great for almost all the dies that I use, but for some of the bag pieces that I'm cutting and bags that we're making, I'm still cutting all those pieces by hand. So eventually I like to work up to a press that is large enough to cut all my bag pieces also. A 16-ton Cowboy hydraulic press. All right, so the third machine I added to my workshop way back when was actually this one. Like many other things that I did, I probably bought this one a little sooner than I actually needed it. Also had absolutely no idea how to use it. It actually sat around collecting more dust for a while until I got a lesson from my friend Greg Brewer. But this is what's called a bell skiver. This helps to thin out the edges of leather. Bell skiver is actually cut using this item here. The bell you see here is actually the blade. It actually is sharp on this edge. You send leather through it and it thins out the edge of it. Great addition to have for wallet makers, belt makers, and the like. Just because it's tucked over here in the corner, very much so in the corner of the workshop here, doesn't mean we don't use it a lot. We actually probably use this machine a couple times a day when we are really rock and rolling here. It's a great addition, something great to have. It's not absolutely mandatory for a leather workshop. Plenty of people skive by hand, but if you're doing a lot of production work, it is very, very handy. This one's from Bogle Greenwell Machine Company, like some of the other machines I have here. Other similar brands are brands like Nippy and a few others. I think Cobra has one, and Cowboy and Texo have some versions of this as well. Good machine to have for you bag makers out there. Similar to the Bell Skiver over here, this machine also makes thick leather thin. Unlike the Bell Skiver thins out the edge of leather. This one actually thins out the entire piece of leather. This is a class 14 Cobra splitter. Now you send the thick leather through the front side, and it gets pushed over a fixed blade, and it comes out split into two different pieces. It's a very useful machine to have if you are splitting or need to make rigid or leather like vegetable tan leathers and bridles and harnesses thinner. That said, it's not a fix for everything. For me, this has been great to have. I don't use it every day, but when I need it, it's very, very helpful, and I love having it in the shop. That said, I am already eyeballing the next version of this, which is going to be what's called a band knife skiver. It's a fairly larger machine. It's a much larger machine to have, but a band knife skiver splits things very, very accurately, and it can take thin leather and make thin leather even thinner. This machine with the fixed blade on it only takes thick leather and makes it thinner. It is what I would call a brute force type machine, because you're pushing leather over a blade that's fixed in place, and it splits it in two. It's not the most accurate machine. If you are doing work like holsters and sheaths and things like that, it's perfectly fine. You're making keychains, it's a perfectly good way to take scrap leather and turn it into usable leather for other items, but it is not something I would use for making wallets or taking soft leathers and making them thinner. For that, you're gonna need what I'm looking for now, which is a band knife splitter. And I'm already eyeballing one, so hopefully this time next year I'll have one in the shop, and this machine will actually get retired or sold to one of you other leather workers out there. Good machine to have, but not a fix for everything. All right, so this is my heat stamping machine. I've had a couple of these over the years. This is the latest one I've gotten. The last one I sold to another leather worker friend. This heat stamper is from the Ernest Schaefer company. I believe they're in New York. It is a model that is built off of the old Quick Print model. The previous heat stamper I had was a Quick Print 86. Works pretty much the same way. This one's just a little modernized with new heat controller, things like that. A heat stamper allows me to put stamps or dies, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you are in the world. Here, flip this down, and this whole unit heats up. This one will heat up to about 400 degrees, and it does that in about 10 minutes. And once it does that, I can pull down on the lever and stamp leather that's underneath it. Some leather, it's actually best to use what's called foils. Foils can be in a metallic color like gold or silver, or foils can also be in natural tones like black and brown, or even red or white. But more often than not, I'm not using any foils at all with this machine. I'm just using the heat on the leather. The result is that you get a nice, crisp, dark impression of whatever there was on that graphic stamp on the leather you put here. What's also nice about this is that you have a table, that this table can move in and out, side to side, so I can position leather the right way. You'll notice I have a bunch of clips down here that I use to take straight edges and affix them to the table and essentially create a jig on the tabletop that allows me to position leather in the same spot over and over and over again. Very, very useful when you're doing multiples of anything, whether it be 10 pieces or whether it be 100 pieces. Being able to create the jig on the fly actually is very helpful. Great machine to have, especially if you're doing a lot of logo and production stamping. Wouldn't be without this one. Over on this side of the table is what I'm kind of dubbing my secret weapon. If you've been on Instagram or followed me in my stories, you've probably seen me working with this. A lot of you have asked questions about what it is, where did it come from, what alien dropped it off. And I tell you, it's nothing too crazy. It does come from a company called Campbell Randall down in Conroe, Texas, and it's called the VSB. VSB stands for Variable Speed Burnisher. Essentially, it is a vertical bench grinder, right? But it's kind of on steroids. It goes crazy fast and it goes crazy slow. And what's even more impressive about that is it's ultra quiet. When you turn it on, you don't even hear it. You can crank it all the way up to as fast as it will go. You barely hear it. What also is impressive about this are these wheels. Campbell Randall sells, I think, 24 or 25 different versions of these wheels. And you pick the wheel based on what you're burnishing or grinding. You have some wheels that are for sanding, some wheels that are for burnishing, some wheels that are for grinding, some wheels for buffing and polishing. The wheels that I've been using here over the last month that I've had this machine are, this is one that is half felt and half leather. This one is one that's all felt. And once you affix them in the machine, it just turns round and round, and you can slide your leather across the surface here, very smooth. There's some Teflon tape up here. Leather slides across very easily, and it does a beautiful job burnishing pieces. This is far from, like most things in here, this is far from being a necessary piece of equipment, but if you're doing a lot of work, it is pretty handy to have. In fact, it's so handy that I've already put an order in for a second one. So before you go out and order one of these for yourself and give them a call, one, if you do call them, tell them that I sent you down there and I showed you this machine, because it's not a very widely known machine. But two, give them a few weeks to get my second one to me first, because I don't want to wait any longer for mine. It does take a little while to get them, but very helpful machine. Happy I have it, and plan on having 2 or 3 of these lined up against the wall at some point in time in the near future. So when you set a lot of spots and you set a lot of rivets and buttons and snaps and things like that, one thing that will really make your work better is having a press. Okay, this is different from the clicker presses. This is what we call a foot press. In fact, this one is from the Weaver company, and it's called their multifunction foot press. This one is new to the shop. We've only had it about a month and a half, 2 months, and we got it because we want to have the ability for more than one person to be here doing rivets, right? And what we're really talking about here is double cap rivets that we're using in some of the other products that we're making. These type of presses, they may look different, but they're very much so similar. They all use these little sets of anvils, depending on the type of item that you're setting, whether it be a rivet or a spot or a eyelet or grommet or something like that. Pop them in here, and then use your foot to depress the anvil here. This was the first foot press I got, and probably the one that gets used the most. It gets used the most because it's in the most closest proximity to all my hardware here. You see it has a couple trays on the side where we can keep the hardware we use most often here. But this one doesn't have a lot of multifunction to it. You can't add a bunch of attachments to it or anything like that. It only does one thing. It goes up and it goes down. It sets rivets and it sets spots, or it sets buttons very, very easily. We use it daily, around the clock. Brandon is probably sitting here this week, and he's probably used this. Let's see, he did 400, 500 pocket protectors this weekend, each with 2 rivets each. So that's about 1,000 rivets he's set right here. You can imagine doing 1,000 rivets by hand. There'll be a lot of margin for error, and also wear you out. With this one, it makes it very, very easy, right? So good machine. This is a Heritage foot press from Weaver. I wish they still made this one. They don't. If they did make it, I, in a perfect world, would have 3 or 4 of these lined up. One for rivets, one for snaps, one for larger snaps. But they don't make this one anymore. You can only get the multifunction press we just looked at, which is also a very good machine. I'm happy with it, but something about the way this machine looks and sounds, I dig it a lot. All right, so let's talk about hand tools. We've got a ton of hand tools in the workshop. Far too many to go through one by one, but what I will say is you'll notice that my hand tools that I use most often are right here in the middle of my workbench. I've got my awl, I've got my bone folder. Well, maybe I don't use all these too often, but they're here. These are the ones I probably use last, right here in the middle of the workbench. I will take a moment to talk about the tool holders. This is from the Romanoff Tools. You can find him on Instagram and on Etsy. Great tool holder, very functional. I'm usually taking tools in and out of this thing, putting them in my tool chest, bringing them back here. It really depends on what I'm working on at the moment. That determines what's in this tool holder. But really cool, really useful tool holder that I keep on the workbench. This thing here, I forget the name of it, but it's kind of like something that holds leather pieces once you're done burnishing them, or you want to do edge finishing. It has magnets in it. The magnet's pretty strong. It holds pieces in place. So if I'm working on a lot of wallet parts or small parts, this thing is incredibly useful and handy. This is fancy stuff, not required, right? Before I start using this, let me show you what I used before that. Any guess what these are? When I'm using these for work, I'm actually just putting my leather pieces in here, and it keeps the edges from touching each other, keeps the glue pieces from touching the work surface. I actually found these in a flea market. These are actually used to keep cats off of sofa. Weirdest thing in the world, but as soon as I saw it, I knew what I wanted to use it for. I don't have cats. I don't even really like cats, but I do know that these work incredibly well to keep your leather pieces off the workbench when you're dyeing and painting the edges. So use and find things around you. May not be intended for leather work, but you can still use it for what you're doing. Also on the workbench is an anvil. This is a Heritage anvil from Weaver. I use this a lot to set copper rivets, brass rivets. I use it to form some leather pieces and pound on things. It's heavy enough where it absorbs the strikes from the hammer, but also not so heavy where I can't pick it up and move it around. I think it's actually called a harness maker's harness maker's anvil because of some of the features it has in it. Like some of these holes that are used for harness making, the slot here for making reins and things like that. Pretty useful piece of equipment. It is probably like 65, 75 bucks from Weaver, and if they have them in stock, it's a great little tool, piece of equipment to order. So those are the hand tools here. Now, for long-term hand tool storage, I have this whole section here. I'll start on this side. This is all the miscellaneous things. I have each drawer kind of broken down by its use. I have all my shop tools like screwdrivers and pliers and things like this for setting D-rings. All that is in here. This drawer is for blades. So if I'm looking for a knife blade or replaceable belt strap cutter blade, it's going to be in this tool. And then anything for the sewing machine, like needles and extra presser feet and slot plates, things like that, all in this drawer. Miscellaneous tools fall in here. And then the chest below is all about, consumables. It has a bunch of nastiness and junk in there right now. But it has my leather conditioner, things like that. These drawers, pretty much going to be just where hardware goes to die, to be honest with you. I buy a lot of hardware. I test out a lot of things. Most of the stuff is not returnable. I hold on to it just in case. But there's probably once or twice a week when I'm searching through this drawer looking for some obscure piece of hardware I bought 3 years ago. It's going to probably be found in this drawer here. I do get a ton of questions about this rack. This is something I built myself. It's built on top of a framework from Rockler. If you go to Rockler's website, they primarily focus on not leatherworking but woodworking. But Rockler makes this thing. It's called a clamp rack, right? And they have some attachments, things like that for woodworking clamps. I don't really use clamps here in the workshop, but I thought that this cart was very useful. I've just modified it to be used for all my leatherworking tools. I got my blades up top. I got my mallets and mauls on the very top shelf of it, and then I've made these other racks, which are basically just, I guess these are 2x2s with holes drilled in them, different sizes to hold all my hole punches, my slickers, my bevelers, and things like that. This is something I probably rearrange once or twice a year, and I'm probably due to rearrange it again. Every time I make it, every time I create these racks for it, I find another way I want to do things to make it more efficient. I'm looking at it now. I think I can get far more holes on here for a lot of hole punches. Some of the hole punches could be a little smaller. I like for my hole punches to be neatly organized here so I can find the ones I want. I love to see these labeled. Simple things I haven't done yet, but I know after using it for a while, those are things I want to do. It's always evolving. There are shelves on the inside. Try to keep the shelves kind of clean. But I got things like zippers and other miscellaneous things that I use around the workshop all stuck on this shelf. And it rolls around. So if I need to roll it to one workbench or another, I always have the option to do that. Let's now talk about workbench surfaces. I get a ton of questions about the two workbenches, my two primary workbenches I have in the shop, the white one and the black one. Everyone wants to know, what are they made out of, how big are they, and things like that. What I can say is this black surface is a material called UHMW. UHMW is pretty dense. It's not very easy to cut. It kind of melts when you cut it with a circular saw. Great material to punch on. I can cut on it. I can punch on it. I don't have to worry about taking out cutting boards and things like that. The entire surface can be worked. You zoom in real fast, or you got in real quick, close. You can see all the holes and scratches and things like that I've acquired over the last 3 years. This surface is about 3 years old, and it's taking a beating, and it may be time to flip it over to have a new surface pretty soon. Now, the white table behind, this is a different material. This material is called HDP, high density polyethylene, I think is how it breaks down. I've had this work surface a bit longer, and if I had to replace the surface, the tops again, which I probably will at some point in the future, I would probably replace the black one with this material, right? This material, HDPE, is definitely due for a changing. I'll do the whole sheet of it to cover the whole tabletop again. It cuts really, really well. It's sturdy enough to punch on, but also soft enough where it doesn't damage your blades at all, which is, my primary concern. I don't want to dull my blades because I'm cutting leather, but I also don't have to break out cutting boards all the time. I just want to throw leather on here, roll it out, and cut as quickly as possible. Good thing about HDPE is you can route the edges. You can cut it very easily with normal power tools. There's no other big concerns about using it. If you can get a hold of it, I'd say get it as thick as possible. When I replace these surfaces, I will replace it with either 3/4 inch HDPE, or I will replace it with 1 inch thick HDPE like I have on the clicker press, the hydraulic clicker press. So 2 good tables. This one's about 4 feet wide by about 6 feet long. The black one here is 4 feet wide by I think just shy of 6.5 feet. So this one's about 6 feet long. This one's about 6.5 feet long. If my shop was a little larger, I'd go with a full 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. That'll happen in the next shop. But these are still pretty big tables. You'll also notice underneath the table is storage. On the black tabletop, I have storage of some exotic hides down there and some other random things that kind of just accumulate throughout the week and throughout the day. Under the white table, it's a little more thoughtful. Doesn't look like it, but I am a little more thoughtful about what goes on here. On the right-hand side, I have all of my bulk storage. These are the sides we're working and using right now. Sides come in from the tanneries, and if we have big jobs, they collect pretty quickly. Big boxes go here. We pull the sides out and use them as quickly as possible. These sides will never end up on the big rack behind me because they're for active projects. And then these boxes will go away, and then after the next big job is scheduled and we get leather in, that leather will go here as well for quick access. On this side, we have all of our soft storage. You'll see some half sides, some shoulders. You'll see things like this merino wool down here. There's, if you go around the side, there's suedes and some goat linings and things like that. Not stuff I use a ton of, but it's also stuff that doesn't go on the big rack back here very easily. Kind of the goal is to keep things as organized as possible. May not look pretty, but it is organized. All the workbenches here I built myself. This one is made out of a 4x4 construction, and I made it 6 or 7 years ago, and it's still holding strong. It's, again, just replaced the top, and it's ready to rock again. The other small workbenches around here are made out of 2x4s. Easy stuff to do, nothing too fancy. The black tabletop is probably the fanciest of them all, if you want to call it that. And the body of this one was made from some cut legs from the Craig company. So if you ever heard of Craig jigs, getting very popular with woodworkers, they make these modular leg systems where you can get legs 6 feet long or 4 feet long or 2 feet long, whatever, and put them together to build a steel frame table. I love the fact that it's on wheels. Having things on wheels here in the shop is very helpful. So we can move it around, we can clean underneath it. When we have big projects come in or we have big machinery that comes in, we can slide things out of the way very easily. Big fan of things being on wheels. This one, not so much on wheels, but that's okay. We have manned up and pushed this out of the way before, but because it's not on wheels, we don't move it as often. So who knows what's underneath it. The last thing I'll say about these tables is the height. I have my table set at about, I think these are about 40 inches. The surface is about 40 inches. I like the idea of being able to work at the table very easily with my arms just slightly bent. I can lean over the table if I need to. It's a comfortable working height for me. Brandon, who's here also just as much as I am, he, I think, complains about them being a little too tall for him. So I guess my encouragement to you is build tables at the height that works best for you. I usually use bar stools at these tables. I don't sit at them using regular table chairs. I like the height. Make tables that work best for you. The other really big piece of, I guess, furniture in the workshop is this really big pallet rack we got back here. This pallet rack we just added to the workshop in early January. And the reason why we added it is because we needed to find more workspace available here in the workshop. Prior to the pallet rack, we just had a big leather rack to the right side of it. It was taking up a ton of space. And as we have more projects coming in, it was important that we have more horizontal workspace. So what we've done, we've put this 4 feet deep pallet rack here. So what it allowed us to do is move all of our I guess, long-term leather storage up higher. And then it created this workspace beneath it on either side of the clicker press. Great addition. I had some people criticize me about the fact the leather being so far up off the ground, having to use a step stool to get to it. It hasn't bothered us at all. These are not the sides that we're grabbing every day. These are the sides we're grabbing every other day. The sides that we're using day to day are usually going to be stored beneath the benches or to the right of the clicker press and underneath the bench over here. At the very top, we have the sides we very rarely touch, which are the really heavy belt sides. Those sides, they're like 16 ounces, 14 ounces thick. You don't touch them very often. And nowadays, when I get sides in here for belts or sides that thick, they're pretty much only for belts. We'll go ahead and strap them out automatically. We don't even wait around. They come in, we strap them out, we put them on our rack over here for easy storage because belt straps are easier to store hanging up than they are laying over or rolled up. Speaking of belt straps, you can see we store all of our straps here hanging up. Previously, I would just lay these over kind of a rack and they'd fall and slide all over the place. But again, trying to emphasize organized storage this year and making things easier on us and making sure our horizontal surfaces are as clear as possible, we devised this. This is actually Brandon's idea. We found these belt racks and we're now just hanging all the straps. We just punch a hole in them at the top, hang them up here, and now they're ready to go. They're easy to see, well organized. They're not bending, getting crimped or creating any kind of roll in them. They're here ready for us to use. We need to make a belt. We take it off the rack. and you're ready to go. Also, when heavy sides come in and we strap them all out, because we still do all the strapping by hand. We don't have a strap cutter in the workshop yet. We strap it all out on one of these tables, and as soon as we strap it, put it on the rack and store it away and out of the way. And then I can still store things in front of it, like the VSD and the hot stamping machine. Makes it a lot easier, makes it a lot neater, and much more organized. And now I always know how many straps I have of any individual color. And I'm not guessing because they're stored away in some corner of the workshop. So really happy we did that. That was very helpful. So we talked about our clicker press earlier. What we didn't talk about is the dies. You saw some dies in the background over there. Those are our welded steel dies. And again, we're going to do a whole video about dies at some point. But I didn't want to skip over the fact that we have a ton of these dies. It's just a different style. These all come from a company called Milwaukee Steel Rule Dies. They do a great job for us. We work with them a lot these days. But you can see we have dies for almost every design that we make. We've invested in them. And it's a sizable investment, but by investing in dies, we can ensure that all the pieces always come out consistently the same size. They cut very easily. Whether we use the manual press or we use the hydraulic press, these will work just fine. Every time we do a new design, we test it out, we cut it on the laser, we cut it by hand, we play around with it for a period of time. But once we are very confident in the design, we like the direction we're going, we'll go ahead and commit to getting dies made so that we can create those products really, really fast. It also means that when I bring help into the workshop, or Brandon needs more help here, we could have them cut these the pieces to our products pretty easily while I have them teach them about measuring and things like that. Measuring and breaking out the ruler to get precise measurements just kills productivity. And so the way you save yourself of that is you get dies made or templates made. One of the most exciting additions to the workshop this year, this big machine here. This is a Kinsole 36 hot stamping machine. Not sure where it came from. I bought it used from a machine shop in St. Louis, Missouri. Had it shipped down here, and took a few weeks to get it put together and back in working order. But it works great now. It is a little bit of a scary machine. There's a ton of pressure it exerts. It gets really, really hot. This whole head unit here heats up, and you can put big stamps and dies on here. I think up to 8 inches by 8 inches, I think is what it will take. You have a big plate here to put work on. And with 3 tons of pressure, it goes down and stamps your work. It is definitely a production type of machine. We only use it, we only turn it on when we have really big jobs and we're going through a lot of items, or we're using heavy leather. It's not very good at stamping lightweight stuff. It's really good at stamping heavyweight stuff. But beautiful machine. It's really cool to hear it in action and see it in motion. It can be a little scary at times when you turn it on because it is very old. And some of these hoses over the last 12 months I've been using it, some of these hoses will pop at times and break off and will scare the crap out of you when it happens. You use it kind of like the clicker press. You have to have both fingers on the activators here to get it to go up and down, which is an important thing because you definitely would not want to get your hand stuck under here. And 1, it'd be very, very hot, and 2, 3 tons of pressure is more than you want to put on your hand. So if you're doing a lot of production work, it's a very cool machine to have in the shop. Happy to have it. All right, so we'll wrap things up by talking about what I believe to be the most important part of the shop. This is my fulfillment area. You'll normally find myself or my wife sitting here. Orders come in, we process orders, we gather things off the shelves in the warehouse space, we pull them from the store, we package them all up here. This is a space that's very, very important to us because all of our boxes are here, shipping materials are here, we have our computer here for doing our labels and tracking shipments and things like that. But when orders come in, we're gonna package them up right here at this table, put the stickers in there, put them in plastic, all that type of stuff, and then finally wrap it up, weigh it, and get it out the door. And usually we have a big box of orders over here to the left-hand side where the mailman or the UPS guy, the FedEx guy comes by, picks it up. It's fulfillment. What else can I say about it? Very, very important, not exciting, not sexy, but it's the most important part of a business, getting orders out the door. All right, folks, there you have it. 1,300 square feet of leather crafting joy right here in Coppell, Texas. It may not be pretty. It is very dusty, and it can be very hot or very cold in here, but I absolutely love being here. It's a blessing to have a shop this size to work in and to craft in. This is where it all happens. You know, you don't have to have anything too fancy. You don't have to have anything too glossy or ritzy to get the job done. You just have to have a get it done type attitude and a couple of hand tools, and when possible, have a couple of other big machines to help you out along the way. Sure, there'll be more shops in the future, and when we have another shop, we'll bring you along for the tour on those too. But until then, this is home, and we love being here every day. Thanks for coming along. I hope that you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Hope that you like this one, and if you are If you like the content we're making here every week and throughout the month, hit the bell icon to get notifications on when the next video is posted. Until the next time, we'll see you. Bye.